These are spirit fingers. These are gold. Someone really needs to stop watching Bring It On, and that someone would be me.
Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me to Herald Square.
Hey there guys, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for another episode of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. Am I wearing my Scotty dog pyjamas on the bottom? Yes I am, and we're just going to pretend that I'm not. If you like all things true crime, supernatural, UFO, conspiracy theory and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you each week with our true crime killer weekends, and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our weirdo Wednesdays, where we'll discuss something spooky I've heard. I will leave a small disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. It does involve details of violent crime. If that's a trigger point for you, then please feel free to turn away now. And remember, if you've got nothing nice to say,
go away, fat man.
But before we dive into this week's episode, let me introduce you to our amazing sponsor. It's HelloFresh. Sadly, I'm all on my lonesome tonight for dinner. Yes, Mr. True Crime is currently out with the boys, and so I thought you and I could do a bit of cooking together. But first, just let me Sabrina myself downstairs. Whoa! Now, you guys know that I'm certainly not a pro in the kitchen, but with HelloFresh's foolproof recipes and pre-portioned ingredients, there's no need to stress, and you can have something tasty on the table in just a few short steps. Tonight, we're going for the super quick penny beef ragu with mushrooms and cheese. And to make things a bit more fun, I thought I'd set myself a wee cooking challenge. So we're gonna set the timer for 20 minutes, and yeah, let's just hope I don't burn the house down. Okay, so over here we have all of our seasonal ingredients sent fresh straight from the farm to your front door. Now, I don't plan on eating all of this delicious food on my own. I'm gonna put half in a container and then I can enjoy it for my lunch tomorrow. Good food like this is too precious to waste, and with HelloFresh's carefully pre-portioned ingredients, you can cut down on your food waste by 23%. Each spice, every herb is hand selected to bring you a perfect balance of flavours. I love that hearty, good for the soul type food, and the super quick beef ragu is just that. This dish is perfect if you've got a busy schedule and you don't have a lot of time to spend in the kitchen, because as part of the HelloFresh Rapid range, it can be prepared in just 20 minutes or less. Gremlins! Ah! We did it! And with over a minute to spare, might I add. And of course it smells incredible, but it's time to put it to the taste test. This is the perfect meal for a family on the go, and look, minimal cleanup, only 2 pots and 2 spoons. There is no better season to start your HelloFresh journey. Spring is a time of new beginnings, so ditch the takeout menus and those bad food habits and go to hellofresh.com and use code 50MEGAN for 50% off, plus your first box ships free. Don't walk, run, go to hellofresh.com and use code 50MEGAN for 50% off, plus your first box ships free. Happy cooking! Alright, alright, alright.
You know what's wrong with you.
I hold my hands up, okay? I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I had to take a bit of a break. You know, there's only so many crime scene photos one can look at before they want to drown themselves in a dog bowl. And on that note, we're gonna talk about books. Okay, who's a reader out there? I'm a reader. I love recommending books. I love receiving recommendations. I mean, I have a very niche taste in books. As a little girl, my grandmother used to take me and my sister to the library. She would run right for the ancient Egyptian aisle, anything with Tutankhamun or Nefertiti. Is that how you say her name? Egyptian stuff. She liked that. Whereas 7-year-old Megan, she was all about straight up murder.
Surprise, surprise.
I would find myself getting lost for hours in R.L. Stein's latest novels, point horror, Goosebumps, anything I could get my grubby little hands on. But my absolute idol always has been and will always be Agatha Christie. Before you switch off, this rant of mine actually does have a point in today's story because it was one of my favourite Agatha Christie novels which inspired me to cover this week's case. And I mean, buckle up. It is a wild ride. There's tall, handsome, mysterious strangers, you've got jack-o'-lanterns, and a vicious crime that still remains a mystery to this very day. So gremlins, dim the lights, make sure all the doors and windows are locked, because tonight we're going to be discussing the terrifying Halloween murder of Beverley Trendall and the man at the window. Halloween night 1984, where it all began, or ended depending on how you look at it. The parents living on Farming Grove looked on proudly as their wee munchkins travelled from door to door yelling, "Trick or treat!" A sea of miniature ETs, gremlins and Darth Vaders stormed the Northolt estate on a quest for the best chocolate bar. Northolt, a town within the London borough of Ealing, was once known for its pony racing. However, during the Second World War, the land was actually used as a prisoner of war camp and army depot. Unfortunately, despite several attempts, the racecourse never returned to its former glory, and the town, with a population of 30,000, is now more well known for its cute village vibes. It's a place where you and the fam can pop down to the local pub for some yummy pie and mash. And in October 1984, it was also the place that 37-year-old Beverley Trendall called home. But weirdly enough, there would be no answer at Beverley's door. And no matter how persistent, the kids of Farming Grove would walk away empty-handed that night. Unbeknownst to her neighbours, as their children enthusiastically rapped on her letterbox, Beverley's lifeless body lay only inches away, just beyond the threshold to her little flat, with a large kitchen knife plunged into her chest. Beverley Ann Trendall was born to her mother Betty Cartwright in 1947. An only child, Beverley was raised in Heyyy, Middlesex, where her mother eventually remarried a man named Terry Cartwright. As a young girl, Beverley was fortunate enough to holiday with her family in Spain. Mum Betty had discovered a hidden gem, a little village which was unknown to many tourists. It was whilst on these vacations with her parents that Beverley fell in love with Spain. After high school, she would spend her days cutting hair at the Magic Comb Salon in Heyyy. Each moment spent dreaming of a new life abroad. The rainy UK was definitely a far cry from the sunny Spanish seaside. Growing up, Beverley was very reserved. She was never the loudest girl in the room. She was very protective with her time and shared it sparingly. Beverley only really opened up to those within her small circle of friends, and amongst them was Audrey Hyde Chambers, who described her as beautiful Beverley. As teenagers, Audrey said that Betty, Beverley's mother, always welcomed them into the house with open arms. Beverley was fiercely independent, and she was so proud when she was able to move into her little council flat on Farming Grove. Betty would later say that her daughter loved having her own space. She was very particular about her belongings, so everything had its place. A natural introvert, Beverley wouldn't allow just anyone into her flat. In fact, when it came to friendships, she was more about quality over quantity. An avid reader, Beverley dreamt of finding that once-in-a-lifetime kind of love, and she wasn't willing to settle for anything less. She watched on as her pals got married to their high school sweethearts and had loads of babies, but that just wasn't her focus, which is actually quite rare for a woman in her 30s in the 1980s, so go Beverley. Instead, she was fantasizing about bigger and better things. Like I said, she'd grown up spending her summers in Spain and had always hoped to relocate there. But she did have other reasons for wanting to move abroad. Whilst over there, she met a local man named Pepe, and she thought he was an absolute babe, and the feeling was mutual. Betty, Beverley's mum, said that her daughter was just a different person when she was in Spain. She had a tan, she was relaxed, and she was confident in her own skin. She was just her best self. When she would journey back home, Pepe would write love letters to Beverley back in the UK. It was clear he was smitten. In fact, on several occasions, he asked if she would move in with him over there, even offering to get her a job working for the same company that he was working for at the time. But as Neo says, Beverley was Miss Independent, and she wanted to be able to speak the language, get her own career started, and find her own place to live. So she decides to take Spanish lessons at the Pinkwell Adult Education Centre, figuring if she can speak the language fluently, she won't be completely relying on a man. Beverley took her classes very seriously, even scheduling some private one-on-one lessons at her tutor's home to speed things along. In 1984, in order to focus on her studies, the hairdresser packed up her blow dryer for a part-time cleaning job within Heathrow Airport. Operation Español was well and truly underway. It was whilst working at the airport that Beverley befriended another young woman named Janet Swan. The co-workers got along right away, and Beverley would confide in Janet, which was actually quite out of character for the 37-year-old introvert. Normally, Beverley would only share her inner thoughts with the big blue hardback journal that she carried with her everywhere. During a cleaning shift, Beverley told Janet she'd been writing to a man in Italy as well as to Pepe in Spain. She'd also mentioned that she'd started dating a man who lived locally, but in typical Beverley fashion, she wasn't very forthcoming with any more additional information on him. It was just kind of in passing. She said that he was good looking, a little bit older than her, but unfortunately she never mentions this man by name. The ladies were supposed to be working together the following afternoon on the 1st of November, so Beverley promises to bring in some photographs of her mystery man. But Janet would never see those photos. In fact, she would never see Beverley again. That day, after finishing her shift, Beverley drove her little Volkswagen Beetle home. She loved that car. It was her baby. Neighbours recalled that she would park the Bug directly below her kitchen window so she could keep an eye on her pride and joy. That Halloween was a busy one for Beverley. She had a hot date with her new mystery man and then a Spanish lesson to get to. Weirdly enough though, she was a no-show for her one-on-one with the tutor. The knocks on Beverley's door from expectant trick-or-treaters were met with silence, and amongst the jack-o'-lanterns and plastic skeletons, there was a real horror scene going on in that little flat, and Beverley Trendall was slowly slipping away. Betty Cartwright, who was in her 60s at the time, lived for those sporadic visits from her only daughter. Of course, she missed seeing Beverley every single day. However, she understood that she'd raised an independent young woman and she needed to have her own life too. Betty was flattered that Beverley still made time for her old mum, but when she checked her calendar on the 29th of November, she realised that she hadn't had a visit in over 4 weeks. Initially, she thought there was nothing to worry about, but when yet another call to Beverley's landline went unanswered, Betty decided that perhaps she should call the police. Just to make sure, just to check. Several attempts to contact her were unsuccessful, and after learning that she hadn't been to work since Halloween, officers forced their way into her Northolt flat via a locked kitchen window. The minute their boots touch the linoleum floor, they know exactly why no one has been able to get a hold of the beautiful 37-year-old. Laying face down in the living room in a partially dried pool of blood is the body of Beverley Trendall. First responders were truly shocked. They really believed that they'd stop by, make sure this woman was okay, and be on their way. The crime scene was a bloody mess, and from the condition of her remains, it was quite clear that Beverley had been dead for quite some time. Could it have been a terrible accident? Did she have a bad fall? Exactly what happened? When Dr. John Burton arrives on scene, he turns Beverley's body over, and the room is completely silent because buried deep within her chest is a large kitchen knife. This was no accident, it was cold-blooded murder. Upon further investigation, it is determined that the cause of death was a single stab wound which punctured Beverley's heart. Now, for a hot second, lead investigator, Detective Inspector Roger Parsons, considers that this could have been a suicide. And yes, someone taking their own life via stabbing is pretty uncommon. Even D.I. Parsons admitted he'd never seen anything like it himself, but it wasn't impossible, so we had to explore that. As out of the ordinary as it may seem, I do understand why they had to look into it. You know, there's no sign of forced entry. The knife used on Beverley was her own, taken from her own kitchen. Is it possible she could have just done this to herself? D.I. Parsons explained that there were no pills found in Beverley's flat and her oven was fueled by non-poisonous gas. So, if for some reason the notion of suicide just swept over Beverley, a knife would have been her only option. Now, as someone who's suffered from mental health issues in the past, I'm not really sure that that's how it works, and I do think that it's a pretty big leap to make just because she had no Pepto in the cupboard. It is important to mention there were no warning signs in the lead up to Beverley's death, and her mother Betty believes that her apartment tells a different story. She informed law enforcement that several of her daughter's prized possessions were now missing. A brown canvas bag was gone, along with Beverley's hairdressing tools, her diary, and letters from Pepe. But probably the most damning proof of ill intent was the disappearance of the murder mystery novel that Beverley had been reading at the time, Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. Was this some sick attempt at a cruel joke, or had the killer taken these trinkets for a reason? Why those specific items? None of them held any real value to anyone but Beverley. Thankfully, D.I. Parsons agreed with Betty that the missing possessions suggested whoever killed Beverley was someone who knew her very well. As this was all going on, police went door to door on the quiet Northolt estate asking residents if they had seen Beverley on the the day of or since Halloween. One of her neighbours, and for lack of a better phrase, she reminds me of those little nosy old ladies. We used to call them curtain twitchers. You know, they'd always just be looking out, seeing what everyone else was up to, getting the gossip. So she's doing what she does best one day, and she catches a glimpse of Beverley. Beverley then walks out of view, and when the woman looks up again, she's startled to see a man staring straight at her. And like something out of a Stephen King novel, he grins this creepy ass wide grin and just begins waving. Feeling a bit uncomfortable and also kinda like she's been caught snooping, the neighbour goes about her business, but the incident stays with her. The only annoying thing about this story is the neighbour can't pinpoint the exact day that this happened. Now, because Beverley wasn't found for over 4 weeks, this meant that people's recollections were now fuzzy. Did she think the weird interaction took place on the same day Beverley was murdered? Yes, but she couldn't say with 100% certainty. Regardless of the sketchy timeline, investigators made a public appeal for this man to come forward. Beverley's case even featured on a special of my favourite TV show of all time, Crime Watch UK, in which her final moments were reenacted on film.
Detectives have been baffled for over a year now by the death of a London woman, Beverley Trendall. Police found her body in her flat about a month after her death. She'd been stabbed. Beverley's diary and some of her personal letters were missing. Exactly when she died is not certain. What is known is that from Halloween onwards, October the 31st last year, Beverley wasn't seen again.
Even after the public broadcast, the man at her window, also believed to have been Beverley's secret boyfriend, was never identified. So who is he? A few days before her vicious murder, Beverley was seen in her local, the Byron pub. Beverley was a local at the bar as it was just a short 20-minute walk from her home on Farming Grove. That evening, barmaid Vivian Starsmere said she recalled Beverley walking into the pub and sitting at a booth with 2 white men and a mixed-raced female. She said she took notice because the other female was strikingly beautiful. One of the men, said to have been around 30-ish, ordered 2 half pints of lager and 2 vodka and orange juices. They appeared to be very familiar with each other, but Vivian didn't recognise anyone other than Beverley. No one else in the group had been seen in the Byron pub before that night, and they haven't returned since. Within the Crime Watch segment, D.I. Parsons asked if the 3 people hanging out with Beverley that night could please contact them. They have never come forward. It is believed that one of the men was the same man seen at the window in Beverley's apartment later that week. However, despite several sightings of this dude, no composite sketch was ever released to the public. And it's a difficult one. This was 1984, CCTV was grainy at best, and not a lot of business owners could actually afford to have it fitted. Debit cards also weren't introduced in the UK until 1987, so there would have been no digital footprint of who was in the pub with Beverley that evening. By tracking Beverley's movements, it was determined that she was killed shortly after arriving home from work on Halloween night. However, a couple of locals recall seeing her distinctive white Volkswagen Beetle with red painted doors on November 1st. Beverley's bug was then parked near her flat, but not in her usual spot. No, her car was being driven by her murderer. Unfortunately, none of the eyewitnesses could say for sure who was behind the wheel. So, with a vague description and not much else to go on, D.I. Parsons and his team decide to widen their search. Law enforcement initially found it suspicious that Pepe's love letters were one of the only things taken from Beverley's flat. Police begin to question his motives and whether it would have been possible possible for him to fly back to the UK, find out Beverley was dating another man, and in a rage, he then kills her. He then takes the letters to cover his tracks. Is it a bit of a stretch? Probably, but as we say in the true crime community, it's usually always the husband, the boyfriend, the significant other. A sentiment that Betty Cartwright didn't share. She said he was an upstanding citizen and a hard worker, and he would have never done this to her daughter. But just to be sure, D.I. Parsons and his team wanted to have a little chat with Pepe. However, the Spanish authorities would make that practically impossible. It basically turns into a we'll interview him, and if we decide he's innocent, then he's innocent type situation. It actually took months for the Spanish authorities to provide D.I. Parsons with Pepe's fingerprints. D.I. Parsons said of the Spanish investigation, and I quote, "In the end, we got what we wanted, but it took a hell of a time." Detectives did manage to track down Beverley's pen pal from Italy, but their experience with Italian police was in stark contrast, calling their handling of the case very efficient. Despite their very best efforts, neither of the men's fingerprints came back as a match to the ones found at the crime scene. Frustratingly so, the investigation was now back at square one, and Beverley's murder was the talk of London, a real-life whodunit, and everyone had their own theories. Aside from the few items the killer took with them, there was no sign of a struggle in Beverley's flat. There was nothing out of place. This would make it seem as though Beverley had unknowingly invited a killer inside, where she was clearly caught off guard by the attack. Childhood best friend Audrey Hyde Chambers later stated in an interview for My London News she would never have let a man pick her up at the pub, further reiterating that her best friend wouldn't have allowed just any random stranger into her home. Whoever this was, they used a weapon that was already a part of the environment and then left it behind along with their fingerprints. Not only that, they stole personal items from the scene, most likely to hide their own identity. I can't believe we're sitting here almost 40 years later and still we have no concrete answer as to who Beverley was dating at that time. This could have been the last person to see her alive, or it could have been the person who took her life. When we look at the things that the perpetrator snatched from the apartment, along with the manner in which Beverley died, it does line up with the theory that she was killed by an intimate partner. Take the single stab wound to the chest. Stabbing someone face to face is such a personal thing. They also didn't bring this knife along with them with the intention of hurting Beverley, so what made them snap? It's almost as if, for whatever reason, in the heat of the moment, the killer stabs Beverley, panic then sets in, and they leave the apartment, only to return the next day. Remember, locals recalled Beverley's Volkswagen Beetle driving around town on November 1st. We now know that she was already dead, so she couldn't have been the driver. Did her murderer do this to establish some sort of alibi? You know, she couldn't have died on Halloween because she was seen the next day. And if so, why would they do that? Was that because they were with her on Halloween? However, in their attempts to cover their tracks, this person made one fatal boo-boo. This car was Beverley's pride and joy, her baby, and when she arrived home, she always made sure to park it in her special spot so that she could look out the window and check it was okay. A personality quirk that clearly her killer wasn't aware of, because when they returned to the flat the next day, they left the bug on the opposite side of the parking lot. Investigators believe that this person came back on November 1st to cause confusion regarding the time of death, and also to grab anything that might physically tie them to the scene. Beverley's blue hardback diary, for instance, she recorded every thought and every feeling into that big book, so it would only make sense that she would name her boyfriend within those same pages. The former hairdresser was known to still give haircuts to her close family and friends. Did she give her new boyfriend a little trim, and is that why her beloved Kit was now missing. And then randomly we have the love letters from Pepe. Why remove those? Was it perhaps to hide the real motive behind the crime? Was this simply a case of crazed jealousy? The evidence would certainly point towards that theory, but there is one thing I just can't get my head around. Why the Agatha Christie novel? Deliberately taking a book about a murder that occurs on Halloween when you've just committed a murder on Halloween seems a little bit on the nose. The only thing that I could think of whilst researching this case is, do you remember back in the day, if you gave someone a book as a gift, you would sometimes write a little message inside, like, to Beverley, from so-and-so. Maybe it was that. We might never know, but one thing's for sure, it was definitely taken for a reason. After years of sifting through tip after tip, Beverley's case eventually went cold, and with no name and no solid description of this person, there wasn't much else that police could do. Sadly, media coverage on this case since 1984 has been pretty minimal, and outside of a few local news articles, I was unable to find any information regarding the progress of the investigation. During the Crime Watch UK segment, which aired only a year after Beverley's body was discovered, Betty Cartwright fought through her own grief to share with viewers exactly what life has been like since losing her only daughter on Halloween.
I just feel so cold inside, you know, it's such a dreadful thing to happen, and not knowing what's happened or who's done it. And this is the awful thing about it, I think. She didn't flit about with a lot of people and get involved in different things. You know, you just can't understand why.
Despite receiving thousands of tips that evening, Beverley's killer still remains at large. The man in the window has never been identified, and whoever his friends were in the pub that evening, they're still not talking. After 39 years of nothing, their silence is deafening at this point, and we need to ask, why is no one fighting for Beverley? It seems as though she may have become a victim of her own reserved nature, and unfortunately a smaller circle of friends means a smaller number of people willing to go to bat for you. There was clearly physical evidence left behind at the scene. Has this been retested? Is there any chance for resolution, not just for Beverley, but for those who were once lucky enough to have loved her? Sadly, her parents have since passed away, both leaving this world without ever knowing why their daughter. In the December of 2019, a writer named Charlie Mason wrote to the Metropolitan Police asking for any updates regarding this investigation. But without reason, on the 5th of February 2020, that request was denied. And guys, you know I'm all about protecting the integrity of an investigation. I mean, how many guys do we see just let out onto the street when they're so clearly guilty? But on the other hand, it's been almost 40 years. What harm could a fresh set of eyes really do? The advances in technology have been massive in the last 39 years. Is there really nothing we can do to get justice for Beverley? This is exactly why I cover cases like this, because with no living relatives and only a handful of friends who've probably moved on in their lives now, who's there in Beverley's corner? Public pressure is so important in historical cases like this, and every share really does make a difference. Beverley Trendall deserves to have her story told, and she deserves to be more than just a footnote on a 1980s newspaper article. Like any good Agatha Christie novel, all the pieces are there, it just takes the right detective to put them together. Beverley was just a quiet, soft-spoken young woman, and she protected her heart fiercely, but sadly she couldn't protect herself from the monster who infiltrated her life. Eyewitnesses describe Beverley's mystery boyfriend as a white male with grey swept back hair, approximately aged 35 to 45. He would have been living in or around London in October 1984. If you have any information, you can make a statement anonymously and securely at Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. I recently read a quote by a writer named John Green, and I think it describes Beverley perfectly. It says, "She loved mysteries so much that she became one." I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. For me, it really helps this wee channel of mine. If you're watching for the first time and you're like, she's okay, she's not too annoying, I could stand her for another half hour, then please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you'd like to see what this wee bonny lass does in her free time, then feel free to follow me, not home because it's illegal, on Instagram at Megan True Crime. I also have a TikTok page at Megan.truecrime. I know I've been MIA, not the rapper, but we will be back on Wednesday with a Weirdo Wednesday. And guys, just a little heads up, it's about psycho stalkers. I hope you all know that I love you so much. Please share Beverley's story far and wide, and remember to lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and also don't bleach your hair months before your wedding, because now we're playing a fun game of will it fall out? Will I need a wig? Who knows? Bye. See ya!